Minister, when you're ready, you can proceed at your own pace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judge here, and the commissioners, Advocate Ali and Ms. Kumar. Thank you for the opportunity to come and give evidence before this commission, which as a department we regard as very, very important for the future of post-school education and training in our country. The commission, just by way of background and introduction, posed 8 questions, all interrelated, which the commission said they would like me to respond to and also reflect upon. At a high level, the focus of the questions relates to the progressive realization of Section 29(1)(b) of the Constitution, and the policy decisions and actions that have been taken by government to realize this right. I will come back to referring specifically just to remind the Commission and others of what Section 29(1)(b) says. Since the establishment of our department, this, of course, the issue of the progressive realization of the right to further education as expressed in the Constitution has been our preoccupation. Though it's not a matter that starts with our department, it's a matter that goes back not only just to 1994, but even prior to 1994, with the establishment of what was known as the Tertiary Education Fund for South Africa, TEFSA, which was established before NSFAS at the insistence of our late President Mandela in order to cater for kids from poor families. However, Judge, after the establishment of our department, we actually recognize that a major priority for our country needed to be the development of the full range of education and training to support all out-of-school youth. All out-of-school youth. It was out of this that we conceptualized the idea of talking about a post-school system whose aim is to overcome the structural challenges facing our society. That a large number of young people would face a bleak future if major changes were not introduced. This was highlighted in our green paper, which we published in January 2012. The Center for Higher Education Transformation in 2009 had conducted a study which clearly showed the nature of the problem. The report of the study showed that in 2007 there were 2.8 million people between the ages of 18 and 24 who were not employed, not in some form of education or training, and yet not severely disabled, what we refer to as NEET. This problem was seen to threaten the social stability of South Africa. I then considered this report, and then we said our mandate must be a comprehensive post-school education and training system, of which higher education, or university education to be specific, would only be a part. Now, our mandate also, therefore, out of this, we saw it as not only dealing with the youth who completed school, but also that our mandate must cover youth that left school before completing. In other words, Judge, our mandate is to respond to all those who have left school whether they've finished or not, whether they went to school or not. That is the mandate of the Department of Higher Education and Training. Within this context, we then said priority actually must be given to technical and vocational education and training sector, as we will describe under our response to question 1. Because our view was that we have a lopsided system. The biggest demand in the country are mid-level skills. Yet you have got a university system that is larger than the college system. That does not mean that university education is not important. I don't want to be misunderstood. Also, as part of emphasis on the TVET college sector, in terms of the huge shortage of mid-level skills, plumbers, electricians, welders, etc., motor mechanics, etc., we then introduced NSFAS, the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, for the first time to cover fees for the TVET college students. Now, the department has consistently, I need to say this up front, put in bids like other departments to National Treasury to improve the funding to support students at full cost of study through NSFAS, both at universities and at TVET colleges. After the 2010 NSFAS review, which we did, I submitted a cabinet memorandum to request additional funds and argued that it was essential for government to substantially increase the NSFAS baseline. Now, since 2013, my department has consistently attempted to get sufficient funds to effectively fund all poor students, following the working group report on fee-free higher education for the poor. Maybe I just need to briefly explain here, although you may come back to this, Judge and commissioners. This is the report that normally is said that I sat on it and did not do anything about it. In fact, our bids, since that report came out, were based at trying to reach the kinds of levels that we need to reach. But I will be explaining that later, how also NSFAS substantially increased but still remained inadequate for our purposes. And after the 2015 fees must fall protest, as we will show later, government provided substantive additional funding. And currently also our work is focused on proposing a funding scheme that will also assist both poor and missing middle students to access higher education and TVET opportunities. Work which we hope will come your way, Judge, at some stage. Because it's an important dimension of what the Commission is dealing with. Now, let me go to the first question, after which then I will pause, as to what measures have been taken by government to respect, protect, promote, and fulfill the right to further education as contained in Section 29(1) of the Constitution. Section 29(1) of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa says that, and I quote, everyone has the right, A, to a basic education, including adult basic education, and B, to further education, which the state, through reasonable measures, must make progressively available and accessible, unquote. The department and government generally reads the Constitution to clearly articulate that basic education, including adult education, is a fundamental and basic right that must be provided to all who need it, while further education, which can be interpreted as including higher education, also referred to as university education here, and technical and vocational education and training, TVET, are secondary rights that must be made progressively available and accessible to those who merit it, in other words, who meet the academic requirements. Within the remit of our department, the provision of community education and training gives effect to Section 29(1)(a), namely that everyone has the right to adult basic education, while the provision of TVET and higher education responds to Section 29(1)(b). In other words, that is why we are building a new layer, a new institution, which we refer to as community education and training colleges. Sometimes, in short, we refer to it as community colleges, to try and realize the right to adult basic education, to escalate what government has been doing. It is noted that Section 29(1) also refers to the provision of school education by the Department of Basic Education, specifically general education and training, which is grades R to 9, which gives effect to Section 29(1)(a, and further education and training, which is grades 10 to 12, which gives effect to Section 29(1)(b). Therefore, to make further education available is interpreted to mean that the system must grow to provide sufficient spaces or opportunities for study. To make it accessible means it should be affordable, and individuals should not be denied access based on financial need, on the basis of a disability or other form of discrimination. Now, what are some of the measures then that government has taken to promote access to further education? Firstly,
Minister, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to understand, would you prefer to do this on a topic-by-topic basis, or do you want to run through all of the topics? Because I think you're moving on to a separate topic now, the next topic.
Oh, I thought that this was still part of, I thought this was still part of 1, which is measures taken by government, and under that we have 1.1, 1.2, and and 1.2 goes a long way, right up to page 13 in terms of my document. But I'm happy to stop here, whatever you prefer, which would make it easier to deal with my evidence, Judge. I'm in your hands.
Maybe I could kick off, Minister, by just asking you some questions around the interpretation of the constitutional right. Just to begin the discussion, Minister, in approaching the interpretation of Section 29(1)(b), does government see at any level the need to realize the right to further education for all? So in other words, in the context of progressive realization, at some point, realizing the right to further education for all, or do you interpret the right as being circumscribed to only provide further education to those who can't afford it?
Thank you for the question. The way the government has interpreted this is that progressive realization of free higher education for the poor. That has been how government has actually anchored this policy, because in terms of the levels of inequality in our country, and given our history, or who has been deprived the most of access to further education, it has been the poor.